Good afternoon. I want to talk to you about something many people hear about but do not always understand. That is the racial wealth gap and why it keeps repeating itself generation after generation. To make this clear, I'm focusing on the area that explains more than people realize: homeownership. If you want to understand why the wealth gap exists, this is where the story begins. Before the Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968, it was completely legal to keep Black families out of certain neighborhoods, block their access to loans, or steer them to less desirable areas. In 1960, about 65% of white households owned their homes. Only about 38% of Black households did. That was a 27-point gap created by rules that were written to favor one group over another. You might think things would look different today, but the gap has barely moved. In fact, it has grown. Current data shows that roughly 74% of white households own their homes, while only 45% of Black households do. That is nearly a 29-point gap. The law changed, but the results did not. The home ownership gap explains a lot about the wealth gap. Wealth is not just about how much money someone earns. It is about what a family can save and pass down. In 2019, the typical white family held about $188,200 in wealth. The typical Black family held about $24,100. That means Black families had about 13 cents in wealth for every $1 a white family had. Even when incomes are similar, the wealth gap stays wide because home ownership builds equity over time, and many Black families never had the chance to start that process. There are also things most people do not think about because they never experienced them. As from parent to child can cover a down payment, offer a safety net, or help pay for college. Many Black families cannot rely on that kind of support because housing discrimination prevented earlier generations from building equity. Without inherited wealth of property, each generation starts from scratch. So why does this matter today? Housing costs are rising. Lending practices still show racial differences, and political debates about zoning, interest rates, and housing access continue. If we do not look directly at how this gap formed, we cannot fix it. Pointing out these facts is not about blame. It is about recognizing that equal access on paper did not create equal outcomes in real life. Homeownership tells the real story of the wealth gap. When one group had generations to build and pass on wealth through property, and another group has had to fight for basic access, the results speak for themselves. Understanding that history is the first step toward changing what comes next. Thank you for listening.